Don't be scared. I'm the super sweet monster with the super sweet new cereal, Count Chocula.
Biffle, here's the super sweet new cereal, Frankenberry.
But I've got chocolate sweeties for monstrous chocolate flavor.
Well, I got berry-flavored sweeties for monster strawberry flavor.
Count Chocula.
Frankenberry.
Hi.
Frankenberry.
Count Chocula.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another glorious episode of Nerd with Dre and Jeff. I'm the second half of that. It's me, Jeff. I'm your co-host, Jeff May. And joining me is...
I'm the Count Chocula to your Frankenberry, because what
Oh.
are we doing this month?
We are starting our season, Dre, because people saw the title. We're starting the season and we're trying to figure out how to word it, but it's basically like holiday themed supernatural entities. We're doing holiday ghosts. I don't know how to describe it.
Well, Halloween mucks this up. Because we're starting with Halloween, everybody's like, oh yeah, Halloween has ghouls. Yeah, of course Halloween has ghouls. I think this actually made a cameo. You broke this topic and a spoiler, so definitely go listen to the 2 episodes ago. Tom and Jeff, I almost messed it up. 2 episodes ago, Jeff Has Cool Friends. That was also kind of a Tom and Jeff watch Batman precursor because he came back. So Tom Ryman was a guest on that show, and you actually give a spoiler. So go back and listen to that episode.
We
If you
do give
didn't,
a spoiler.
we're probably going to say it in this one too, but you should listen to both. So pause this episode, go listen to that and get the spoiler. We'll give you, but you said that he was like, oh yeah, horror movies. We need those. You're like, no, it's not just Halloween though. It's because we're going to do Halloween. We're going to do Thanksgiving. We're going to do Christmas. And then of course, Mother Blanken, Charles Dickens ruins that with all the ghosts, but we have a theme, people. Ghouls related to holidays.
Ghouls, holiday ghouls. And we have October and November solid, obviously, because we're recording the October episode. December, we have options. And I like that we have a couple months to figure it out.
We have a bonus, and I really like it's just hard because we learned this like at the start of Nerd, Jeff. It is really hard to do a pledge drive during the holiday. Going into Christmas is the worst time to try and do a Patreon pledge drive because that's when most people are cutting back for holiday expenses. But whatever encouragement you can give in the next couple of months is huge because we have a bonus one. And really, if I'm being candid, sorry, I'll be honest with y'all because we love you. You're our listeners and we love you all. It really is going to boil down more to how available you are and how busy you are. Coming into December, we have a glorious bonus topic I would love to record that we discussed on an episode of I Must Drake You a few weeks back.
I like
we will
that.
absolutely do that if your schedule allows, I think is
and we've done this so far. So this will be our 3rd Christmas.
I love it.
We have a habit of leaving a bonus Christmas episode up for patrons. So, and I'm sure I'll find time to do that because I like that gift.
I love Jeff loving Christmas so much for that. And I cut you off for that anyway. Sorry, Jeff.
Yeah.
Because
I think it's good. Like it's a gift. It is in a way a gift to you, Dre, because we do this show together. It's another episode of your show that we can do for free. Fuck it. Right.
Yeah.
But also on top of that, I like making it as a gift to our patrons. Like people really like this show. So
I'll say I appreciate it. Because by the way, for those that don't know, the first 2 years, the first year of Nerd, we did He-Man and She-Ra Christmas special as the bonus episode. And by the way, we're going to keep up this tradition too. What we basically do is we release the bonus episode for free the following year. Yeah. So He-Man and She-Ra went out for free last year. And then last year we did Iron Man 3 as our holiday themed episode that was a bonus. So this year, all of you fools that have not been patrons, you'll get that this year.
You'll get it.
And then next year, you're going to have to wait. But subscribe ahead of time so you don't have to wait. But Jeff, you've had this in your pocket for a while. This is really early on in Nerd. What are we talking about this month?
We are talking about the General Mills Monster cereals. That's right. We are talking about, of course, the original 2, Count Chocula and Frankenberry, plus the additions of Blueberry Brute, Fruity Yummy Mummy, and Carmela Crunch, as well as the Monster Mash and Monster Mash remixes. Basically, we're talking about sort of the lore, popularity, the weird sense of popularity in this sort of, and just the importance of these characters and this cereal that was year round until they found out that they were actually getting the exact same amount of sales if they just released it over 2 months, which is insane. If you think about
it reminds me a lot. If we're going to stay in the Jeffiverse, the Jeff Mayverse,
Yeah.
Jeff Multiverse. There's got to be a pun there. Help me out in the comments, people. Easy way to connect Jeff May and Multiverse. Please make it happen. But you had back in your hometown, Worcester, Massachusetts.
Oh yeah, David Bertolino from Spooky World.
Yeah, fantastic episode of Jeff Has Cool Friends. So much in the back catalog if you haven't listened, but similar idea where there's this like area in Boston that makes all of its money. Worcester.
Yeah, it was actually like Marlborough. It was a very small, relatively small suburb.
But yeah, makes all of its money like this theme for Halloween, which makes sense. And we have those things that pop up, right? We have one of those out here, the Halloween stores that pop up where they find a warehouse that's kind of vacant and pop up for a couple of months and sell all their stuff. So yeah, this tracks with that, and it makes a lot of sense. And Jeff, we're going to definitely go over the history of this cereal. I am amazed how many places this cereal can go. But I do have to ask this because this was kind of originally your idea, again, stealing an Alex Schmittyism. What drew this to you? Because this popped into your head early on as an idea for the show.
Couple of things. One, Count Chocula is my favorite cereal of all time.
Really?
I think so. Like my favorite like candy made of corn is Count Chocula. Like I have cereals that I prefer. I don't buy Count Chocula very often. Maybe once every couple of years because it is really bad for you, which is fine. Like I really like boring cereals a lot. Like I like the yellow big biscuit of shredded wheat with honey because I'm insane.
Yeah. What?
Because I'm 1,000 years old. But
okay.
Count Chocula
we'll give it to you, I guess.
is so good. I love Count Chocula. I've always loved Count Chocula. It's not a cereal that I got very often. We weren't able to afford that as a kid. My mom could only buy stuff that was like really on sale, and this stuff was like never on sale
because it was all it's basically it was always, although it's odd because to the point it eventually becomes seasonal. You would figure
in
that
the late 2000s, I believe.
I am wondering if just like when we were younger, if things would just be like, hey, we'll put it on sale when it's not the season. But then I'm wondering if they didn't want to set a precedent, a dangerous precedent of people waiting till the end of the season.
It was like it was like a premium cereal. And you didn't like, there are cereals that you would get on sale all the time. So there was a lot of stuff like we would get, I remember Berry Kicks. Berry Kicks was the thing we had all the time. And like Crispix, like my mom wasn't much for, we're not getting a $3 box of cereal. We're getting the $1.99 box of cereal. And that's the best we can do. And like, good, like she shouldn't have bought that garbage, but boy, I love it. I think the characters themselves are more iconic than the cereal itself.
Now, to be fair, let's point out the common thing that they did, which is these are based off of real world icons, right? They went after Frankenstein and Dracula, Bela Lugosi, of course, making them that. And then there was something about 70s, 80s, because then, of course, Castlevania comes up in the 80s as well. So, like, the Monster World multiverse that, like, Tom Cruise failed with recently to try again, that has always been there and always works well.
Yeah, Universal Monsters are incredibly popular.
And it is funny just how well they paired with a cereal. I'll do my couple of stories about the cereal before we get to the history.
Let's go for it.
So one is, in college, I bought a box of these for myself. And I had a fun moment where I discovered the rules about the dorms, which is you're actually not allowed to, at Colorado State University, in the dorms. Apparently, you're not allowed to bring your own food and beverage into the cafeteria, which I did not know.
Into
whatever.
The cafeteria.
Yeah, like where you do the meal plans. Because I bought myself a box, and of course, because they have milk in the cafeteria, I brought my own box. And I recall somebody. I hate younger me, Jeff, because younger me could have been so nice, could have been a hero in this moment. I was eating a box. I had a box of Count Chocula next to me as I'm sitting there eating. And there were boxes of cereal in the cafeteria area. Somebody walked up to me and said, hey, can I get the Count Chocula? And I said, oh, no, I actually bought this myself. And he was like, oh, and then the lady who actually really liked me that always checked, and she said, by the way, you're not actually allowed to bring your own food in. So I regret that and could no longer
eat I did.
Well, I no longer could bring Count Chocula. But in that moment, Jeff, whoever you were, if we happen to know each other and you're listening, I regret not just saying, go ahead, go with God, have some, sir. And then maybe even leaving it there. And then maybe I could have done that. Instead of getting in trouble being told, don't bring your own food in, I could have been the guy that brought in Count Chocula cereal into the dorms. I could have been a hero, Jeff. And
You
that
could have
moment,
been the hero of State University.
that moment has passed, Jeff, unfortunately. I did mention this to you. I'll bring this story up again. This ties into a lot of things. I was briefly the hero in the cafeteria once when I was younger for getting in a hallway boxing match that I won by knockout because I am a monster because I was too tired to go more than 2 rounds. So I just swung away, put the guy away that I had 50 pounds on in weight. And everybody cheered when I came down for dinner at the dorm that night. And I confused my friends because they were like, why is everybody making noises at you?
Oh,
You're
you
a
were
nerd.
actually boxing. It wasn't a fight.
It was, no, we had boxing gloves on, but it was
Oh.
not official. So
Well, you got weighed in by 50 pounds.
yeah. So shocker, I was able to,
Congratulations,
yeah.
Congratulations on somebody fighting 7 weight classes out of their own division.
Yeah. Don't call it. We are established. This, if there is nothing that gets established with this lore, Jeff, it should be that like college age Dre was stupid and did stupid stuff, but
Well-
nerdy stupid stuff. But there we go. The reason I bring that punching up though, by the way, Jeff, is by the way,
I have a
we've been
similar
doing this-
story, by the way.
Okay. Let's let you get to that. And then I'll bring up my less cool point.
Senior year in high school, a cafeteria brawl occurred that I was at the center of. And I gained fame or infamy, depending on how you want to describe it, in the school. And it was all people ever wanted to talk about. And it even got brought up when I started teaching somebody, because I taught in that district. And they were like, so, hey, didn't you do this? My friend across from me got hit. And I jumped on top of a cafeteria table, and plunged myself onto somebody and got into a huge fight, which weirdly I ended up becoming tangentially related to these people as well, because my stepdad's former stepdaughter is the mother of one of the kids. So my stepdad had a wife that she had kids. That happens.
Yeah.
And that woman had passed away, unfortunately, and he married my mom, but my mom still like knows and loves that family. It's local. It's all local, real townies. So I knew these people as an adult. But yeah, I plunged myself onto and it was like, this was 1999. So people were like chanting like Jerry and ECW,
Oh, yeah, that makes it-
EC
Yeah.
for the 2 chants. And I got like a slightly sort of legendary status in my school because of that. And I ended up manipulating the conversation where the people that I ended up fighting with didn't have a good reputation in the school. They were kind of like the pothead scumbags. And I got nothing. And they got a week out. I got away with it. And like when I was getting, like, it was a brawl. Like there was a huge, and like people were getting peeled off. And when I was smart enough to know that to yell, I'm just holding him. And I was holding him, but I was holding him so my friend could hit him.
Sorry to go for the easy joke that we've done before, the like cop Jeff. Like you're like, he's resisting.
I know it was like, I should have been punished, but I wasn't. But it definitely gave me some high school clout, because there were fights in our school, but there was never a 265-pound giant jumping on top of a cafeteria table in front of everybody and plunging onto somebody.
I've brought this up before with the Nerd Show. We're very close in age. We have a lot of similar interests, which drives the show. That's why this show, Jeff, as long as you and I both want to do it, it's never going to die. We are never going to run out of material. It is wild, the overlaps, and for us both to have that story, it's wild. To bring that up, though, by the way, we have 2 birthday, I want to say, trilogies we've got going, which I really enjoy. So for the Nerd Show on my month, September, the Dre episodes of Nerd that make up what I want to call the Dre birthday trilogy are Zelda 2. That was the inaugural show. I was like, I'm never going to get a chance to talk Zelda 2 again. I'm taking my shot. Searching for Bobby Fischer. Oh my God, Dre, that's such a Dre thing. And then
Man,
you
picked some terrible shit, didn't you?
I did, right? Whereas for Jeff, I mean, I hate you because yours are so much cooler. We got Punch Out. Punch Out was the first Jeff May birthday episode. And in fact, it was released on your birthday. So perfect episode. We got Adventures in Babysitting as episode number 2, which you love, Bootleg Grandma. That I love that episode. And now we've got Monster Cereal. So I am frustrated where if I put those 2 trilogies up against each other to the Nerdiverse, I know which one I would pick. Sorry to hate that. And that's with the Zelda 2 boost, which is an amazing boost. I still know what decision I would give that.
Yeah, I mean, I forgot we did Adventures in Babysitting, by the way.
That's a good one. And I re-listened to it. It's such a good.
But I loved the monster cereals because they were like this unattainable goal too, like the monster cereals they were these things that I really loved and couldn't get because we were poor. We were broke.
There is poor, and also that's the other thing. Because I mean, I was socioeconomically a little better. We'd get the sugar cereals, but it's like when you try and convince your parents to get you a cereal, there are levels where this is a cereal. Maybe this, the Kix one, kid tested, mother approved. It's sugary, but maybe
we had Berry Kix was the thing that we got the most.
I hated that one. That one sucked. Anyway, sorry. Never cared much for Trix either. But then this one, they're like, okay, so let me get this straight. It's sugary chocolate pieces. You're like, right. They're like, with marshmallows. You're like, correct. They're like, that churns the milk into chocolate milk. You're like, yes. And you're like, and it's healthy. They're like, get out of here. No. You're like, that is candy.
There's B12. We have some niacin and some riboflavin.
Got them. So yeah. So
I always loved because that was always funny when you'd see those and they're like, it's part of a balanced breakfast. And the rest of the breakfast was like 2 eggs, toast, juice, a grapefruit. And you're like, that seems to be like
an insulin shot, a doctor there with a heart monitor.
Like a slice of cake is part of a balanced dinner. And you're like, well, if you add it to a balanced dinner, then it technically is part of that.
That is wrong. This is definitely funny talking to the ad man who knows everything. That is a really weird part about the United States on our regulations around ads that Reagan really helped dismantle. You can almost make shit up. You can basically make shit up. And even some of the stuff where you're like, they can't say that. They're like, actually, we can say whatever we want. And it is wild how much you can get away with, especially in the realms of marketing to children, which this was brilliant to do.
Now, here's the thing I'm going to say. As I have gotten older, like Count Chocula is considered like my legendary cereal. And I guess you could say Chocolate Lucky Charms also counts because it's basically the same thing whenever we'd have that. But I think now if I was granted an opportunity to eat any of the 6 flavors,
ridiculous,
I would pick Fruit Brute.
Fruit Brute, which I've never had. I know that's
well, yeah, we're not old enough to have had it.
Are we? It came out.
Fruit Brute was canceled in 1982.
It was 82. So it lasted.
So we were too young. We probably weren't on solid food at that point.
I was going to say my parents didn't have the forethought to say our child is born. Let us stockpile some Fruit Brute for when he has solid food to eat. I'll bring that up with him at the next time I talk.
Yeah, Fruit Brute is one of those things like Fruit Brute is like Jello pudding pops, or PB Crisp or something like that, where it's this thing that everybody seems to have these really high memories of, but not enough to not have gotten it canceled when it was actually being produced. Or PB Max, right? There are these foods that are held in the cultural zeitgeist as being like, oh, like I want it back, but they weren't buying it at the first place. Like that happens all the time. Ecto Cooler is a great example of that. Like these things that get by on the nostalgia of human beings. And Fruit Brute is a huge Gen X and sort of like maybe not, I don't know if you classify it as boomers because, Fruit Brute came out in like 1974 or something like that. And it was like generic fruit. Now they've sort of been like Fruit Brute is cherry. And I would love to try a cherry cereal like that.
I thought they said the original flavor was lime-based.
It was like lime-ish. They say it was generic fruit. But I think we're talking from the same thing. You're talking about the Dan Larson Secret Galaxy thing where he said that many people said that it tasted like lime.
Oh, by the way, here's what I'm going to do. Thank you for prompting me. Dan Larson does this as well. So I just want to make sure. So
about 2 years ago.
No, so Dan Larson, if you go to Secret Galaxy, they will list like where they got stuff from. And the problem with subjects like this, like Monster Cereal, is the internet almost eats itself. You start looking at references and you notice other references that reference references. So I'm at least just going to give out very quickly the top level ones that that at least I use. So I used Eric Shea's A Weird Science article on comic redesigns, which we'll get to with Jim Lee makes an appearance. Of
What
course,
a lazy choice for Jim Lee.
the Blueberry one. We'll get there. Don't worry.
Yeah, sure.
All right, Jeff is. Oh, man, I want to jump ahead, but we'll get there. Of course, as Jeff mentioned, Dan Larson over at Secret Galaxy. I'm envious because he does 18 minutes, and there is way more than 18 minutes just on Monster Cereal alone. I did Chris Buckner over at Saturday Morning Fever that has just a nice article. Of course, Wikipedia is really solid on that. And then I also have to really thank Adam Todd Brown, who bashes it, but he actually tries out Carmella Creeper. Because good
Carmella
God,
Crunch, right?
or Carmella Crunch, I was not going to do that, Jeff.
Yeah, he did it on a Get Open, right?
It was on one of the early Get Opens, which I think he's now just kind of sunk into in broad daylight. You can go find Adam Todd Brown over at In Broad Daylight at Substock, and it's adamtoddbrown.substack.com. I don't know why I said Substock, Jeff. It's Substack. Adam Todd Brown does writing and podcasting there. Good stuff to listen to. The last thing before we get into the history, I did do a trial run with my kiddo. So I got a box of Count Chocula and I got a box of Frankenberry.
Yep. The two OG.
Good, bad news, Jeff. I like sugary cereal. They're both fine. I like them both.
Yeah.
My kiddo, this is really weird. He actually, got the first bowl and took one bite. And then he was like getting in trouble, running around. So I went down to talk to him and he smelled my breath and he said, that popcorn smells good. He could smell the Count Chocula. He liked the smell and he tried it and he really liked it. I got the Frankenberry and he recognized the same box. They have a very similar design. Mm-hmm. He tried it and said, that cereal tastes like toothpaste. I don't like it. So from a kid tested perspective, kid in the 2020 aughts or whatever, we've got Count Chocula holds up, even though the recipe changed in 1993, which we'll get to. And Frankenberry tastes like toothpaste.
Kids need to appreciate history better. First off, what kind of toothpaste tastes like strawberries? You giving this kid nerd toothpaste, Dre?
I don't know. I think he actually has like a Disney Princesses one, and I think it does actually have a toothpaste.
Time to break. How old is he?
7?
What? Welcome to Midtown, pal. Remember that Crest Sparkle that we had as kids? The Crest Sparkle 3D, and it would come out of the tubes in like star shapes and stuff. My parents got us a tube of that. Must have been on sale one time, and I remember just being like, or Aquafresh. It was like blue, and the mascot was like a blue dollop of toothpaste wearing like Ray Charles sunglasses.
This feels made up, but I know you know advertising enough to know it's not. So that's wild. This is a blind spot for me.
Yeah, it was like whatever it was. Crest Sparkle. I think it might have been Crest Sparkle. But yeah. So do they do? Can you get strawberry toothpaste for adults?
Probably. I mean, you can get whatever you want, Jeff. It's a brand new era.
They've now since changed Crest Sparkle to Kids Crest.
That is so much more boring, but it makes sense.
Yeah, I was right. Look, and I was even right about the Ray Charles sunglasses on the blog.
We make cavities see stars, man. The ads in the 80s. I mean, say what you will about Reagan dismantling a country, but good God, the ads and stuff we got as kids, top notch stuff. All right, Jeff. So we have some personal histories on it. We have our legendary fights. We have a kid review of 2 of the cereals, and go check out Adam Todd Brown for one of the others. So you're gonna have to do your own research, everybody out there, for Fruit Brute, what the Mummy one, and
Fruity Yummy Mummy.
Fruity Yummy Mummy.
Which, by the way, I was not aware of Fruit Brute until after Fruity Yummy Mummy, because Fruity Yummy Mummy came out in 1988, and that was like, I remember the comic books I was reading would have ads for Fruity Yummy Mummy. And there was one of them I'll never forget. It was like a Mad Fold-In ad where you could fold the page and it would tell you what the new flavor coming would be. And you'd fold it and it would come to be a mummy.
And that was another part, is there were lots of, which we'll get to, lots of crossovers. But let's do it's in the script if you need, Jeff. the top level, just, and like I said, this is from Wikipedia, but and this is unlike He-Man lines, unlike Star Wars lines. This is much quicker. There's, maybe 10 or 12 different pivotal moments in
Yeah, the
the serial.
timeline is very distinct, and there's not 80 different things that came out. It's very specific, and it's rooted back in what, 1971?
That's when it started, and it was, I think, Laura Levine or Levine, however you want to say it. She comes up with the idea and had done like Tony the Tiger, comes up with the idea of, hey, let's just use monsters. And, you basically can go off of existing. Although I will, and then of course they go through an ad agency and all this. I think one of the artists on the ad agency had done Charlie Brown Christmas. This I'm remembering, I'm fairly certain,
Yep.
from Secret Galaxy. But here's a question, top level question to stall us before we even get going, as I want to do, Jeff. He looks like a bud.
But
The
his head
color,
looks like a butt.
I think it's supposed to be a strawberry.
It seems like the head is supposed to be slightly strawberry shaped. Now, so you have this introduction of the monsters, which is it's a scary endeavor to take because it's a gamble, because kids are afraid of monsters. It's the point, right? So how do they do this? Well, make them goofy cartoons, but on top of that, I believe the first ever commercial, a kid walks by them because they're arguing over who has better cereal. And then a kid walks by them and they're both afraid of the kid. And that's the big way to make the kids understand that there's no danger in these characters.
So again, yeah, this comes out in 1970, and it's very formulaic. And I even
71.
put it 71, and I even put this in the script. I said, it's not Shakespeare. This is fine. The formula is Count Chocula says, my chocolate cereal is better. It's got, and then what I love so much about the early commercials, Jeff, is my cereal's better. And then it's vitamin charged is what they keep showing on the screen to justify. You literally have a cartoon showing a bowl of cereal that is just a candy bar, essentially. And then they have the gall to say vitamin charged. So it's Count Chocula saying, my chocolate cereal is better. And then you've got Frankenberry saying, my cereal is better. It's basically chocolate versus strawberry. This is very Neapolitan ice cream. Funny that there was a time in our history where the two could be the same, because I'm just like, everybody's going to go for chocolate, right? Regardless, they argue back and forth whose is better. And then at the end, something scares them, and it's always something innocuous. So in the first commercial, it's a little kid walking by because they're in a grocery store. In another commercial, they're arguing in Frankenstein's lab, and a cat comes by and goes, meow, and they get scared. Later episode, there's a bird. When Booberry shows up, right? The formula changed a little where the three argue, Booberry gets kicked away, and then Booberry, because he's a ghost, will reappear and scare him. So the formula is very much Frankenstein and Dracula are arguing over cereal. My chocolate is better. My strawberry is better. Marshmallows, candy, ask your parents, clearly, right? And then something scares them at the end to let the kids know, hey, these monsters aren't scary.
You could kick the shit out of these monsters, kids.
Yeah, they are hilarious. So there's that. So that's the 1971 Booberry Chocula. There was the
Frankenberry
brief
Chocula.
did I say Booberry
You
Chocula?
jumped ahead.
I jumped. I'm jumping the gun. I would defer to Dan Larson to go on this because this story is hilarious. But there was the funny thing where some of the ingredients for the food coloring were indigestible in these cereals. And so kids were getting basically pink and blue. I think it was pink and green colored poop from Frankenberry and Booberry. And they had to change the formula because of that.
So the history is that essentially what happened was a kid, after eating Frankenberry twice, was eating it, and they found out that the dye that they were using in the original recipe for Frankenberry is undigestible. Not to say that it is dangerous in any way, but basically kids were shitting out what basically looked like strawberry ice cream. Their shit was pink. And so they kind of were like, oh, I don't remember the Booberry aspect of it, but I do remember, because it was almost immediately. It was like early 1972. And so they figured it out once they realized they removed it from the kid's diet and he became normal. Then they gave it back to him and he shit pink again. They're like, all right, pink, any sort of reddish color in your stool is very dangerous because you could think that it is intestinal bleeding or internal bleeding of any way. But yes. So, it's one of those things where they were like, oh, whoops. Sorry, this unnatural dye that we use is undigestible by human beings, the people that are supposed to be eating this.
And that does remain a very US versus the rest of the world. I think, try to break out into more of the tangential Mayburst. I believe on Some More News, I think Eric Barnes, if I'm remembering right, potentially Eric Barnes, I don't want to give credit, he is one of the writers, but somebody on Some More News did a show on United States food standards and how much lower they are than the rest of the world. And it's stuff like this. Our children's cereal, they're like, it's okay to use dye that's undigestible. That's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of stuff. But anyway, okay, so that's 71. Let's keep going. What else we got?
And so like 1972, they kind of reformulate it and they fix the pigment, right? And then at the end of that year, we get Blueberry, which is a ghost. And like I forget who the actor is that he's supposed to be. Is it Peter Lorre?
Isn't it the dude on Fantasy Island, like the plane dude? That's the voice. That's what the voice sounds like to me.
I
but if
think it's supposed to
some-
be Peter Lorre. Yes, this guy, right? Like I think that's Peter Lorre.
Yeah.
So he comes in and he looks just like a blue cab driving ghost or something. Like he looks like a weirdo. And then in 74, we have Fruit Brute, who is a werewolf. Now, Fruit Brute, two things about it. Number one, generic name. So you didn't know what actual flavor you were getting. Two, the werewolf is probably like the least, as far as the universal monsters go, like the least cool. Right? Like the ones people people don't care.
I guess the problem, it's almost Jekyll and Hyde, where the coolness of the werewolf is the story and like the transformation. So to have the mascot itself is kind of hard. Sorry, I got to get this in because there's nowhere else in the show this would come in organically. I was watching the Goosebumps movie with my kiddo, the one with Jack Black.
Jack Black.
And that movie is really good and really clever. And something I loved in that movie is a werewolf shows up and one of the characters bites the werewolf at one point, and the werewolf runs away. And it's because Jeffy didn't brush his teeth when he was young and he has silver fillings. I had to give that a nice
Brilliant
clap. Good. You know, we're going to come up later in this show to like kids stuff that is way better than it has any need to be. So again, these cereals were just designed to sell sugar to kids. Mm-hmm. And the mythos, the amount of stuff, the ways it goes, their radio plays, etc., is just ridiculous. Now, Blueberry in many incarnations, as you will say later, does feel very boring. They're just like, it feels like they got the name and we're like, we got it. We don't have to think much harder, even into characters. And it's a ghost named Blueberry. It's a dad joke, and we're done.
Yeah. And bye.
Yeah, Fruit Brute was a problem for many reasons. Not recognizable as the werewolf. It literally looks like any other cartoon mascot.
Yeah, they have to make it legally distinct from Universal, right? But you can't own the concept of monsters. You have to make them legally distinct, right? But a werewolf, it's just like, when you think about all of the Universal monsters, like you think obviously Dracula, Frankenstein, right? Those are the two main ones. And then you get into like Creature from the Black Lagoon. And then you're like, oh yeah, I think the werewolf and maybe like the Invisible Man or something. I don't know. Like it starts to get, and I know, Lon Chaney and all that. I know that they did iconic performances, but it's just like werewolves just don't do as well. I know that sounds stupid. Like it's a dumb thing to say, but it is true.
All right. Now, to this point, this is kind of amusing. You noted that we would have completely missed the Fruit Brute. I had always remembered it as Frankenberry, but I guess Fruit Brute does make an appearance. Quentin Tarantino loves him, has him show up in his thing. What I also love, by the way,
it's a perfect example of a "give me that back" kind of
character,
kind of guy.
But again, I agree with your point. You have so many good points that come up routinely on the show about nostalgia. And I think there is a major difference between I remember that, I love that, I want it. Fruit Strike Gum being an example. Can you believe they're discontinuing it? And you're like, a product can, and at least in a capitalism world, cannot be, that's cool, I'll buy it once a year. So when you're like, why did they get rid of it? It's, well, if you buy it once a year as a novelty, it's not a good that needs to stick around the entire damn year.
Well, it really comes down to this. Not everybody will buy it just once a year. But if you look at supply and demand, you look at basic economics, right? Supply and demand, right? The demand might stay the same, but when something is then removed and becomes seasonal, the demand starts to increase as the supply remains nothing. Right? So like people are like, oh, I wish I could have that. And like, yeah, sorry, it's March. You can't. And then they time it out. early September hits or late August and it's out there. Now that demand becomes a fervor. It's like the McRib, right? Like the McRib would be a money loser if it existed all year round. But because it just shows up randomly, it becomes this big event. And so when something is a big event, it boosts the sales. So they're selling as many boxes of Monster cereal over the course of 2 months that they would over the course of the whole year because they've made it a special thing.
So, Jeff, to keep a nice in-season theme, this concept I'm going to, I don't remember the term. It's like hot shotting or something. I've heard Jim Cornette bring it up about wrestling, and he actually brings it up with the problem of the Attitude Era. So in wrestling, you want people to remain interested. And one thing you can do to boost interest is have these huge stories, these huge gimmicks. Where that can blow up in your face is if you have 2 years of storyline that are twists and turns and you burn them all out, then first off, you're out of material. And then second off, people just eventually lose interest. So again, the Monster cereal once a year, oh, they're back. Oh, cool. It's back. Even Fruit Stripe gum, they could probably pull that trick. But if Monster cereal every 3 months was like, we're leaving, we're coming back, we're leaving, we're coming back, it would fall apart. So
Yeah.
is that. Did you ever try? We both mentioned that, me for dietary reasons and you for money reasons, probably both of us because they're expensive too. Did you try much Blueberry? Did you get it before the flavor, the recipe changed?
Blueberry was not something have I ever had blueberry? I don't know.
And
I will say this,
you
it's
haven't
actually
had
my
fruit.
brother's favorite cereal.
Huh.
My brother Dan, who you might have listened to the Jeff Has Cool Friends episode with him. But yeah, Blueberry was always Dan's favorite. He used to I remember going to his house and he would literally, I don't know why he did this, but in his 20s, he had the boxes of Blueberry that he ate. He tore the fronts off and put them on his wall like hunting trophies.
I dig that.
Yeah.
There's that. And no, here's the key if we're going back to the timeline, which again, the good news is we're almost through it. Then we'll get to discuss lots of things like Jeff insulting comic legend Jim Lee. In 1993, they actually changed the formula from oat to basically cornmeal only. So here's another piece of nostalgic trivia for all of us out there, me included. The recipe of Monster cereal, if you ate it in the 80s and then ate it later, you have been eating a different recipe since then.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, just let you know.
Yeah, I mean, because now all cereals, they're like corn garbage now. Everything's corn. There's a great documentary, and have I brought the documentary up on here at all? That documentary about corn.
Well, there's the great Adam Todd Brown podcast on corn that I've heard of, but not that.
So there's a 2007 documentary called
Jeff sorry, I hate to do this. Jeff I love it when I make a bad pun that the other podcaster or friend is, I'm not even going to engage with that.
Corn, the band. Fuck you.
I thought you, okay, that's even better. Jeff missed it. Okay, keep going.
So there's a 2007 documentary called King Corn. And it talks about sort of like how we have created useless nutrition. So like an anti-nutritional nutrition. And we did so by sort of investing really heavily in trash corn. And it's actually fundamentally changing our DNA. It's a wonderful documentary and I really can't suggest it enough. But one of the things is like the lobbyists, like corn is such an insane crop in New England. Remember there was the big ethanol push where they were trying to get everyone to go to ethanol. So they were paying for all this corn to be grown and then it just became not a thing. Nobody was using it.
Yeah.
And like all of our meat is usually fed this ditch corn. So like now the meat's DNA so our food is now structurally changing our own DNA. It's wild. It's like how we're getting all these microplastics in our body and stuff.
You know what I love about documentaries like that and anything is you just said 2007 and there are so many things where you're like, have you seen this great thing about how, the military industrial complex is messing this up or this is happening? You're like, it's from 30 years ago. And you're like, oh, did anything change? And you're like, no.
I recently saw it like within the past couple of years. It was on like maybe Tubi or something like that. I was just like, I was like, oh, this looks interesting. And I watched it, and it's these two guys. I think they were like MIT grads or something, and they basically wanted to know more about what's going on. So they bought like an acre of farmland in the Midwest, and they like worked to grow corn, and they talk about like the science of it and everything like that, and how it used to have a high protein content in all the niblets, which are now almost disappeared. So it's almost all starch. And as a reminder, just in case you didn't know this, corn is not a vegetable. It just isn't. It's a grain.
It's a grain. It's a grain. Oh,
It is a
interesting.
grain. So you do not get the vitamins that you think you're getting when you eat corn. Like corn isn't much of anything. It is a grain. There's a reason we make bread out of it. Dre, you
Corn
look so confused
bread?
right now.
Corn bread, Jeff. Is such a thing even possible?
I know people are saying. But and the reason I know you guys want to hear fun about monster cereals and stuff like that, and I will get there. But that's the thing is like when it was made with oats and made with all these other things, there was obviously that's a grain, but it was like if you go the further you go back to like food, generally speaking, it was a better quality item that we have now than what we have now. Usually,
Oh, yeah,
not
for-
every time. Obviously, I know about Upton Sinclair, but like in general, things have gotten catastrophically worse with
The
our processed food.
the quality, ironically, that term processed food, the quality that we give to food after the fact, checking it for things, et cetera, has gone up. And part of that is because of what you're saying, right? In order to get away with decreasing the quality of the food, you actually have to check it really bad to make sure that you're not inadvertently poisoning people with lead from the machine that's chopping it up really quick. So it's a weird trade-off where it's, yeah, the food, yes, you're less likely to randomly get poisoned by your food than you maybe were in the 30s, but it is definitely not as good quality on average as it was in the 30s.
Here's how bad it is. Only in America would the Coca-Cola made with pure sugar be considered the healthy option. Because we use high fructose corn syrup, which is just garbage. It's absolute garbage. There's a reason. And again, I don't eat this cereal now. And if I do, I would eat it maybe as like an ice cream topping or something like that. I would minimize it. I'd have maybe one box a year max ever. And that is because it is fundamentally just destructive to your body. It's bad. And I love the characters and I love the flavor of the cereal, but that doesn't mean I love the cereal.
And I do love this cereal. Like I said, I had, I tried through 2 boxes, and here's an annoyance, Jeff, which we'll get to a little down. I'm going to take a brief break for sponsors for 2 reasons. So I'll say first, the next thing on the timeline is in 2005, Count Chocula was shown. This is according to Wikipedia.
No, you
so
skipped
I'm
1988.
what did we miss in 88?
Fruity
Okay,
Yummy
so
Mummy, or 87.
So, okay, that's when fruit. Okay, so let's take a brief step back. Oh, so I jumped ahead and did mention that the recipe changed. Let's give Fruity Yummy Mummy their due, and then we'll have a nice commercial break.
It is a 6th. That character is a 6th of the entire pantheon of these creatures. So yeah, he should.
Although it is interesting, we have the Justice League thing going where Chocula, Frankenberry, and then Boo Berry, they're like the original, and they always show up. And then the other characters,
You're Batman, you're Superman, and you're Wonder Woman. Yeah,
yeah. Who's who for you? If you have to,
Chocula has to be Batman. So Frankenberry would have to be Superman, and then Boo Berry would be Wonder Woman.
That Invisible Jed, Invisible. I am annoyed how well that lines up, Jeff. Okay, continue.
Yummy Mummy came in the Flash, and
very nice.
He came in the Flash. And it was really because remember too, another interesting thing is this really fits because I don't know if you remember the 1980s, but there was a low-key obsession with ancient Egypt that passed through. When you look at the late 70s into the 80s and you look at like Steve Martin doing King Tut, there was a famous dog food called King Cuts at the time. There was like the Walk Like an Egyptian by the Bangles. Like there was the big tour of Tutankhamun, right? He went on tour.
You have Kim Cattrall showing up as the mummy as a mannequin. That's her backstory. Yeah, her backstory in the mannequin movie is she's from ancient Egypt.
Ancient Egypt was like in vogue at the time. So like that actually fits perfectly when they're like, oh, well, everybody loves Egypt nowadays. I mean, granted, it was at the end of that, but that works. That really works. So they brought Fruity Yummy Mummy, which was more of, I believe, a mixed fruit flavor. that they then, I think, circled back to on re-releases as being like a citrus
Yeah.
flavor, which I
Yeah,
screw with. I liked OJ's. Remember OJ's cereal?
like OJ. Are you talking OJ as in the juice
Not
or
OJ
OJ
Simpson.
as
It
yeah?
was orange flavored Apple Jacks, basically.
Interesting. I don't hate
And it
the
was
idea
like
of
there
that. I
was a
like that.
cowboy. So it was a cowboy that was the guy that they're why am I screwing up their spokes?
Mascot. Yeah,
Yeah,
mascot.
beast.
Most spokesperson.
And he had a brand. It was like a circle with a J in it. He would brand the cereal on the commercials.
What? Oh, this. I mean, when this was originally pitched, you actually originally pitched like cartoon mascots of cereal. Then we decided instead of that being a full season, we would cut down to monster cereal for one episode, and then it tied in perfectly to this season. Man, cartoon mascots for cereal are just wild and a huge something we can easily revisit on a future season of Nerd.
Oh yeah,
All
you
right.
want to talk about we could talk about Nintendo cereal. We
Oh,
could
I
talk
love
about Nintendo. It's a cereal now. Dunkin' Donuts cereal. When Rice Krispie treats came out, when Triples came in to try to
I am
better version.
furious Rice Krispie treats has been discontinued. I love that cereal.
Yeah,
It's-
I mean it's just make them, just make Rice
Yeah.
Krispie treats and break them up.
It's not the same, Jeff. The
No, I
cereal is
know.
so much. I don't
My-
like Rice Krispie treats that much. They're okay. I'll eat them. They're an all right dessert. The cereal, though,
Do you know what
amazing.
turned me off of sugary cereals? I think it was the creation of Oreo O's. That to me was me being like, oh, I think I get it now. Like
Interesting.
I started to realize, oh, these are garbage. This is just Oreos.
That
And
sounds
it's not
good.
food.
Yeah, that sounds
Um,
good. And then I love one of my favorite desserts is the cookies and cream ice cream sandwich that has 2 Oreo patties.
Oh yeah, that's great. Love an ice cream sandwich. I prefer a Toll House Chipwich though.
That's too much for me for some odd reason. The two Oreo cookies on the side, I'm like, love this. And when it's 2 chocolate chip cookies on the side, I'm like, get away from me. Which is crazy because that's
You're a
coming from me, and
moron.
I'm admitting I know because it doesn't make sense because I'm just like, dude, buy a box of Count Chocolate. That's great. And then I'm like, hey, 2 chocolate chip cookies on the end. And by the way, I would eat like warm chocolate chip cookies and like a scoop of ice cream. That sounds like a delicious dessert.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, I don't know. I don't know what to tell
I
you, Jeff.
really actually like Count Chocula as an ice cream topping.
Ooh, that makes sense. Now, speaking of which, I think I'm doing the right spot. I'm not jumping ahead. In 2005, we get Count Chocula as a MasterCard icon. We also start seeing them cleverly take this brand and go, hey, they can be other things. So they actually do the fruit cereals, they do as fruit roll-ups, and they do a Count Chocula cereal bar. Citation needed on Wikipedia. We are reading this right off of Wikipedia.
Well,
As
General
mentioned,
Mills was really big on that at the time. Remember they did Cinnamon Toast Crunch, Golden Grams, Fruit Loops had one, I believe.
the cereal bars are just a little too much for me. I mean, and that's coming out of
And
my
they had that like milk. They had the milk paste.
Yeah, it's not. They're
in
not. They're
there.
too much. They're too
I
much.
didn't
And that's
hate
coming
them.
from me.
I've had a
Interesting.
few of them. I think I had the Cinnamon Toast. Oh, they had a Golden Grams one that was really good.
I have never been a huge fan of Golden Grams in terms of sugary cereal.
That's weird.
Like Cinnamon Toast Crunch, I like.
I prefer
Well,
more subtle sweetness in my cereal, I guess. That was very alliterative. But I don't prefer, I mean, granted, we're talking about the monster cereals and I do love them, but like when I look at all the like my favorite, like the ones that I would eat now, I like the subtle sweetness of Hicks or, like I said, putting honey on a big old biscuit of.
What about honey on
shredded wheat.
Crispix? That sounds good. I do
I like
like.
Crispix the way they are. I like the sweetness of Crispix natural.
Ooh, interesting.
I
do
loved
like
when Crispix was a cereal we had a lot when I was a kid.
Crispix is good. Crispix is solid.
Yeah.
And if you're someone who does sprinkle sugar or put honey on it, it also absorbs well because of the little things in there.
It's weird. I was so fat as a kid, and I always loved overly sugary stuff. But I look at it now, and I'm like, well, actually, now that I look at like the ones I preferred when I was eating, like I didn't like a lot of the Pebbles cereal. Pebbles would go on sale all the time, so that was like the one sugar cereal we got the most. Because I don't know if Berry Berry Kicks would count as a sugary cereal, maybe a little bit.
Okay, Jeff, but on the same vein of branching out and commercializing, let's talk about producers. So if you head over to patreon.com patreon.com/Jeff May. You can help us keep the lights on around here. If you love what we're doing, we can keep doing more of it. You can produce this show. You can produce Jeff Has Cool Friends. You can get exclusives like Ugg Fine with Kim Crawl. Jeff can send you stuff in the mail. You can watch me break stuff and not send it to you in the mail and laugh at you. That is also an option. You can't sponsor that yet, though, Jeff. So anyway, on that term, we let you produce this show, and there are some people that have produced the Nerd Show, Jeff. Let's run them down. Do you want to go first or second?
Yeah. Let's give a big shout out to Burrito. My man Burrito. Let's give a big shout out to the Enchanted Wandering Unpierced Left Nipple Cider served at room temperature. Dre, spoiler alert, that person has a gift for you that I have in my possession.
Interesting in many regards. And by the way, shout out if you check out I Must Drake You, which is me on Mondays breaking cards. Jeff does I Must Break You Wednesdays at Jeff Has Cool Cards. I'm going to get as many sponsorships in here as possible. Jeff, I actually worked on pronouncing that name because that is a hard producer name because you want to end on the nipple, but you actually need to end on the cider. That's the advice.
Served at room temperature?
Served at room temperature.
Shout out to Norm from Cheers. Shout out to Bimmy and Jimmy out fighting crime. And of course,
apologies, Jeff. I'm going to audible you there. I'm going to change Bimmy and Jimmy out fighting crime to Count Chocula and Frankenberry out fighting crime because I try and make it topical when it applies.
All right. And finally, drinkwithmikeslater.com. Every time Dre plugs the back catalog.
You're
already all drunk by now.
You're dead. You get diabetes from eating this cereal and you get
diabetes.
Yeah.
Diabetes. Okay, we got there.
Very good, Jeff. We got the dad jokes on the show. I'm going to start calling Yoda Old Grogu just to see what happens. I love that one. And by the way, Jeff Has Cool Cards. If you go check that out, I think you've broken some like Grogu Mandalorian stuff recently. So
not only that, but sometimes I open stuff not on camera because if I think that maybe the month is a little light, I'll just be like, you know what? I'll just get this and open it. And I ended up picking up a couple of blasters of Star Wars Chrome on my birthday because, I was sad. And I pulled a Grogu red blaster parallel. And so someone's getting that this month.
It's so cool. It's one of those, I don't need more stuff. And then I don't ever like being like, Jeff, send it to me because I want other people. But yeah, you should at least announce that and let people know. Again, patreon.com/Jeff May. The rookie card tiers where Jeff sends you things in the mail is probably, if you are a card collector, is one of the best deals on the net.
That's the best deal I have on the best deal that I have on this entire Patreon is the cards in the mail. And they take me, the whole process takes me about two full work days to get them thrown together and sent out. Financially speaking, it was a terrible idea for me to do it.
I would say you are I've said this a lot. This is not even Home Shopping Network. It's just true. Like the great thing about you, Jeff, is you do not half-ass anything, which is why you are such a good friend. You are such a cool person. And then that is the rough part, is almost like the person making the sugary cereal. When I talk to you, I'm like, Jeff, you don't have to do that much. And you're like, God damn it. We are not putting cornstarch in our cereal. We're doing it the right way. And that's why Jeff May's cereal went out of business in 1987 when it was acquired by General Mills. Anyway, on to the remaining producers. We have Ricky Cilantro. We have Dan's Ninja Turtle Ooze. That's a back catalog reference and a shout out to my brother both. And finally, Ursuline Jesus. A lot of themes there. So, all right, Jeff, we are at 2005. We're actually almost through this, though I am kind of shocked that the last end of when Monsters cereal really gets commercialized is almost as heavy as the first half.
So now this is actually, though, this is an important sort of cycle here, because we can't just talk about 2005, this happened, and then move on, because that would be disingenuous to what was actually happening around that time. In the 2000s, the wave of 80s nostalgia was stronger than it's ever been. It was one of those things where the things that were throwaway, there was, not too recently before that, there was the retro Masters of the Universe commemorative sets, and bringing back Masters of the Universe as the 2000X, which we've done an episode on. And it really comes, and it's like this, the elder millennial generation and the younger Gen X generation, right? They oftentimes had more disposable income because they weren't starting families earlier. And nostalgia is a hell of a drug. So it starts to be this thing where advertising, and you see this a lot now, advertising has become the commodity. Think about how badly you want McDonald's chicken McNugget toy, right? And that's not real. It's stupid. It's garbage. It's crap. But it's our crap, and it reminds us of when we were young. So it makes sense that if you want, it's a huge trick. If you can use nostalgia to get attention, if you want to bring Alf out into people are going to be like, I remember that. And then they will have a fond memory of that. Can you believe they let Alf do these collect call commercials? I loved Alf as a kid. I'm going to use that. Like, it fucking works. So that's why in 2005,
man, the like 1-800 call ATT commercials, if that makes it as an episode of advertising, I'm looking forward to that. Those things were wild.
they weren't really intense. There was the David Spade ones with that other guy. I think those were 1-800 collect. That guy that used to like to yell, the like bleach blonde guy.
Yeah, well, anyway, but I do remember those, and yeah, going for that. Hey, you recognize that guy? Use them to, yeah, Mr. T is telling you to call collect with this. Use that. You remember him from the A-Team, right? So it's absolutely, and yeah, that is the funny thing about this brand, as it is really commoditizable. You are mentioning that about this era, right, is where they also go with the realization that the brand is more valuable than the cereal. This is where it starts going seasonal. And we're still in that cycle to this day. As mentioned, I picked up a couple boxes. They show up on the end caps at the local Kroger, Walmart, et cetera. Now, 2010 is when they did kind of shift over to just being a seasonal cereal. And as mentioned, also just as the brand, people selling you your nostalgia back to you.
Yeah. And also, too, we're going to start seeing things. And I don't necessarily think I saw this in the timeline. Now you think about it, and it's like Funko Pops is a great example of the understanding of what is and isn't sort of value as a consumer good, right? Like, what's worth making a Funko Pop of? And these characters have been Funko Pops. Like,
of course,
these characters, like, it is this thing. And I was going to say in the early 2000s, I remember that the Fox Kids network had that album that they released, right?
that's what you sent me ahead of this,
I
which
did
is
send
wild.
you that. It was like a 2002. It was called like, I forget, it's like Rhythm and Booze.
Was it
Well,
2002? It's 13 Days of Halloween. Rhythm and Booze is the
Oh no, that's Freeform, by the way, that channel.
all right.
And they do 13 days of Halloween, but it's now 31 days. They switched the numbers.
Oh, interesting. Okay. But you're saying that came out in 2002, and I believe that was a CD on the box, right?
Yeah, it was a CD that came with the box. Yeah.
And that does keep in with the nostalgia, because I mentioned this to you as well. This didn't come up when we were back in the 70s, but in the 70s, they released a lot of stuff with the, I guess actually I know this, it's not in the official timeline of just the cereal releases, but of course, a huge part of the cereal is that they would release, specialty, in certain boxes. Specially marked boxes have this. They would have special rings with the characters on them, or little racers or eraser heads. At one point, they had Starbursts. Early on, 79, they had little phonographs, right? Little records. And what's wild is they have 3 little records of them. And I thought one said disco, and I thought it was a song. And when I actually did go out and listen to them, and they are radio plays. So in 1979, you could buy a box of Monsters cereal and get a little phonograph with a record play of Count Chocula and Frankenberry.
There's one about him going to Hollywood.
There's one going to Hollywood, yep. And then there's a Boo Berry one as well. So yeah, one for each of the major 3. So that does keep very much in line. We're like early 2000s. They are, that's a very interesting thing, is these cereals do also modernize themselves. So stuff in the mail. So in the 70s, 80s, you get collectible toys, things, whatever. In the 90s, 2000s, they did a bunch of tie-ins. I have these listed down below.
It's a multimedia extravaganza.
It's absolutely true. I have these listed next to the cereals, Jeff, but they did tie-ins for Scooby-Doo. In actually like the 90s, 2000s, they did Scooby-Doo Marshmallows. They actually did do a throwback to the original monster movies. Apologies, I know I'm condensing a lot of the later 2000s, but a bunch happens there, and it's very boring to just go step by step, so I'll throw it in. They did like the original monster movies where they had Dracula and Frankenstein, the original.
Oh, is that the one where they accidentally put the Star of David on?
There was some controversy because they changed the logo to look like the Star of David, and they got complaints about that being anti-Semitic, and they apologized but did not recall the boxes. In the 80s,
I mean, like, historically speaking, like, blood libel is the thing that the Jews have been accused of a lot. So yeah, it
Yeah.
probably wasn't a good idea, but they're also like, look, we're not recalling the boxes. We didn't mean any.
There's definitely some QA control things. I mean, Frankenberry looking like a butt just as is. I'm like, how did that get past it? And there were a couple times when, in the 90s and the 2000s where they're like 3D or claymation or whatever. It's in the script if you scroll all the way down, Jeff, but they briefly did a live action Count Chocula. And I have no idea how this passed QA because first off, the cartoon version of Count Chocula has like a pointed chin. And this one has a butt chin that looks like balls on his chin. And this was in a kid's
His chin
commercial.
is balls.
And
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, he looked like a freak. He looked like an absolute freak. That was a mistake.
there were multiple times where these cartoons boxes got out and you're like, did no one QA it? And they're like, obviously not. So yeah.
Clearly
And
not.
the last part, I mean, again, this has been Monster Cereal its entire time. So I'm talking about stuff. They, of course, collaborated with Goosebumps. It would be foolish not to. You could send away for a Goosebumps 2000 hat. They collaborated with Casper the Ghost. You could get a Casper. You could send away for a Casper the Ghost lunchbox. This is Casper the Ghost, the Bull Pullman movie.
So I like that you called it the Bill Pullman movie,
Yeah. Because,
Christina Ricci movie,
oh, yeah. She would be the bigger name to use now. But I
not
guess
the Kathleen Turner movie,
but I'm thinking like that was
the
right
Dan
near like
Aykroyd movie.
Dan Aykroyd's in Casper
He's
the
a
Ghost.
cameo as Ray Stantz. Yeah, he leaves.
Huh, all
We're
right.
gonna call someone else.
I was
The
thinking
Devon Sawa movie.
okay, that is unforgivable on my part. We do love Devon Sawa around here. Apologies. Okay, that one I'll forgive. The other one's Bill
Paris.
Pullman, I'm thinking Independence Day. And then of course in the 70s and 80s they did cutouts for Star Trek and they gave away Star Wars cards in the boxes, Jeff. So I mean that's
Yeah.
been their history the entire time. So I mean that's to me, if we're kind of talking holistically, because I'm taking like a 10,000-foot view right now about the Monster cereals, like it is amazing from the get. Of course, there was a tie-in to the old Monsters. They always had tie-ins, whatever. They always had a level of theatricality, marketability, stories that they kept updating and adapting. And we'll get to, the new characters, the new character, I guess, in the 2000s briefly. But it has been fascinating that it is the embodiment of the nostalgia repackaging of marketing. And it has been doing that since day one, which is kind of remarkable because, right, we're over 50 years now, right? 71. These cereals have been going for 55 years almost.
God, they're old.
Yep.
So good.
We're all old, Jeff.
Yeah. We're so
Any other comments in the 2000s? I mean, I'll have to give a shout out to Carmela Creeper, to Adam Todd Brown, who actually did do an unboxing and reviewing of it. And there's one other kind of tie-in thing that we were already talking, but I'll let you kind of pick and choose what you want in the 2000s.
Mhm. I mean, obviously, that 2005 push where they were like the MasterCard commercial with the icons. And it was like all these famous advertising mascots. That's a good example of the value of nostalgia. That's the first example of them sort of really representing their own nostalgia and being like, look, we understand that these are iconic characters, even if the cereal isn't what it used to be. And there's so many characters out there, but like cereal mascots are famously great. Like people love them. There's Keith Gleason does a book called Mighty Mascots. It's a comic that's basically like a team of cereal mascots or food mascots that are like adventurers. It's like the Avengers, but fake cereal mascots. And it's great.
Love it.
Keith Gleason makes that. Yeah.
And the other one that I want to definitely point out that we talked earlier is another thing they did. They did comics branch outs and they actually approached comic artists to do a redesign of the characters. And Jim Lee.
Well, they did I don't know if I'd call it their version of it, right? So famously, the most well-known, obviously, is Jim Lee, because I think they went to DC and DC had a very good, Jim Lee's the vice president of publishing or something there. And he's, oh yeah, I'll do it. He takes Boo Berry, which is like so boring. If you look at his Boo Berry thing, it might as well not be drawn by Jim Lee. There's nothing about that character that would require the Jim Lee style. So I love Jim Lee. I think his art is incredible. He's one of the greatest living artists in the world. And yet it is the most boring of the three covers, because Count Chocula was done by Terry and Rachel Dodson, who are a great team. And that has that personal flair that you'd see. That looks like a Terry Dodson drawing.
And
then getting
Dave Johnson
Dave
is
Johnson to do, I mean, Dave Johnson, come on. Like, his stuff is so good. Like, all his 100 Bullets covers and everything like that. Just an unbelievable artist. And his Frankenberry really reflects that. Jim Lee's Booberry, it's not that it sucks. It's uninspiring and boring. So anyway, that's where I'm going with that.
And of course, as I've mentioned, Jim Lee has one of my few grail items in the collecting space, because in the 1991, I want to say, Impel Uncanny X-Men drawn by Jim Lee, there are autographed Jim Lee Rogue cards that are out there with a certificate of authenticity. And these are like so hyper rare that I don't even see pictures and stuff of them out there. The only one I've seen ever pop up on eBay is an Excalibur. And it's one of those where to hunt one down, the number of boxes you would have to go through to get one or to purchase them is cost prohibitive, even for an overzealous collector. So Jim Lee, if Jim Lee ever pops on the podcast and comes onto this episode, I guess the only cap I want to give is, Jim Lee, we are huge fans of yours, just
Great.
not in this one specific case.
Right, here's what I'm going to do. Halloween, I am going to be at Jennifer Muro's. I go there every Halloween, right? They hand out in Toluca Lake, great spot. That's where I've met a lot of some of my great, cool friends, David Silverman, Kirk Thatcher, all these wonderful people. What I'm going to do is walk over to Jim Lee's house, and I will bring an X-Men card. And if he's there, I'm going to try to get him to sign it.
That is awesome.
For you.
That would be ridiculous, Jeff. Although what would be funnier is if you were like, I'm going to go over to Jim Lee's house with a box of vintage Blueberry cereal, knock on the door and say, Jim Lee, you pull out a marker and you're like, Jim Lee, and then you X out the box. And you're like, this is garbage, and
Draw
throw
this
it
better.
and walk away.
Draw this interestingly. Well, to be fair, here's the thing. Art and artists, like, I can respect somebody's talent, but if art isn't interesting to me, I don't necessarily care. And that's kind of like where I've become with, like, Alex Ross he's one of the most talented people in the world. He paints photorealistic. He paints superheroes as photorealistic, right? That was awesome in Kingdom Come and in Marvels and all that stuff. At this point in time now, I'm not impressed by it, because the style is just incredible artist. And I really like to see something more like a Mignola that's really stylized and really isn't just a talent, but it's a vision that I don't feel like I get. So like the Booberry, it's uninspired. As somebody who loves artwork, Jim Lee, all that stuff, like comic art in general, the fact that Jim Lee shows up for this and makes just an incredibly uninspiring thing, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and assume he did a preliminary drawing that General Mills rejected. And they said, we need you to stick to the classic style. That is my hypothesis as to why it's the only thing, it's the way I can save my brain, is to be like,
but let's be clear, it also makes sense. That is the rough part of this industry. I'll bring up an amazing back episode of Jeff Has Cool Friends, Take a Shot, Mike Slater. Anyway, you talked to Olivia, who does these amazing pinup
I think that was Sideshow. I don't think she's
Was it Sideshow? Oh, that's a bummer. So
I'll get her on the show again, but
you should. It was an amazing episode. I mean, Sideshow not making that as easily available. I think some places have your old show cached. That's their mistake, though, to not just have that for free, because it's free advertising and whatever. People are silly. You did an episode with her, and she does talk about that commerce thing where you get commercial contracts for a main company, and they give you
Cadbury
lots of
bunnies,
stuff like that. And you're like, I'll do this creative thing. They're like, we don't want that. And you're like, so you'll give me a ton of money, more money than I've made for any of my like custom things, to basically just give you the exact same bunny with a slightly different bent ear to say I designed it. And they're like, sold. So you actually have stories in your back catalog.
I actually have the files of the bunnies, the sex bunnies. I like have the sex, and they're very sexual bunnies.
And it's just funny. Yeah, I'm buying. So you even have that in your back pocket because you had that on a previous podcast that may be findable out there on the internet. If not, great future guest for Jeff Has Cool Friends. of amazing artists get approached by corporate. They're like, I can do this amazing stuff for you. And you have been all over the place on that because you also, I believe, with like Tom Ryman, brought that up with the Marvel movies about how Marvel in some cases would just shutter great artists too much. Edgar Wright, I don't want to do your Ant-Man. You're holding me in too much. And then you're like, actually, maybe they let Taika Waititi go too far, like maybe rein it back. So that balance between commerce and art, and I could just buy Jim Lee being like, I'm too busy. You rejected the first thing. Here's a ghost. Have a good day.
Yeah,
If you
because it does
if
look
you
like
ever
it was completed in 6 minutes.
if you ever get a chance to talk to Jim, that's the bigger thing, Jeff. If you are able to get Jim to sign any cards or anything at any point, if you meet him, I know you're affable and have tons to talk. But if you ever get the scoop on the monster cereal Jim Lee, I would love to hear that. The last thing I want to talk, Jeff, because we are coming close to time, you actually threatened me. Everybody out there, Jeff and Dre, the ultimate brawl we all want in the future, I know, since we both have our brawling histories. Jeff was like, if we go for 3 hours on this, I'll take you down. So I've been threatened. We have a time limit. But I did want to bring up Carmela Creeper, who is,
Oh no, we have plenty of time, Dre.
well, anyway, not too much, actually, to be candid. That'll get
Yeah.
cut out. So yeah, not too much longer. But Carmela Creeper,
She showed up in what, 2023 last year?
2023.
She's a
This is
zombie.
zombie who tastes like caramel. Her cereal tastes like caramel apples, and she's a DJ. I got nothing, Jeff. This is where you get old and you're like, I don't understand the kids anymore. Adam Todd Brown said he tried the cereal and was unimpressed by it. I love caramel apples, like the candy, right? The
So-
caramel apple candy. I actually love that candy. This isn't even for me. So if you're someone out there that enjoys this cereal, they still produce it, still out there. You can still find it seasonally, but that was like the last addition to the monster cereal. The one good piece of news is, actually getting female representation in the monster universe. There we go.
Also, it's important to remember too that they released Monster Mash.
Which is like all the
Just
cereal. That
a-
was really cool. Yeah.
It was all the cereal, but it was all just all the marshmallows, right? They made just one flat fruit.
I think it was Count Chocula's cereal, if I recall, then with just a different marshmallow representing, copying the Lucky Charms playbook of you can just mix up the marshmallows as you want for custom cereals. Because as I mentioned, at one point they did that for Scooby-Doo. I want to say Casper the Ghost too. For Casper the Ghost, they did ghosts and witch marshmallows. So
It
that
was
has
a
been a
berry
common-
flavored cereal.
So it was berry, not chocolate.
It started with berry, and originally it was the 5 men, and then they did a Monster Mash, I think Redux or whatever.
And Jeff, I want to say I actually sent you a box of that last Halloween because I saw it at the store and was like, this looks disgusting. So I'm curious if you did anything with it or just like, Dre, what are you doing? And just burned it.
I probably tried it. I don't remember.
It
I'm looking
cannot
at it now. Monster Mash Remix has Carmela Creeper in it because
Yep.
she's a DJ. Because it's 2023, 2024. They re-released that. One of the things that's really funny, and I mentioned it, I think I did a tweet about it, but the mummy is like caked up. The mummy's got a thick ass. Fruity yummy mummy.
What?
If you look at him,
Okay, we'll look this up right now.
I think I've
Monster.
actually done a tweet about it.
If you find the tweet, I will retweet it because it is topical. And I'm going to see if I have any other notes. I was going to say one question, try to open up a giant can of worms, right? As I say, I want us to wind down. A fascinating part of the commercials is they're kind of changing style. Initially, they have really good animation, again, done by like the Charlie Brown Christmas Carol folk. But they did kind of switch into almost the Sesame Street-ish thing where they had live action children interacting with cartoons.
Yep.
Which was kind of cool. Come into the
Very
90s.
70s. That was a
Yeah.
very 1970s thing. Yeah.
You come in, we get different styles in the future. As mentioned a couple times, they try 3D. They do a live action. I had no idea what they were doing. At one point, they do a claymation version. Even that, this is a very funny case where I was like, these characters are awesome as animated. Please do not do anything other than animated for these characters.
There's 2 versions you can get. You can get the vintage boxes at Target. They're Target exclusives. I don't know if you can still do that now, but it's always been like that the Target had the vintage ones. The modern ones look like a Disney Channel cartoon now.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have the aesthetic that I frankly don't prefer because it seems much more like antiseptic and almost. I like my cartoons looking like cartoons, if that makes sense. Like I like a classic 2D.
On that point, what
bright
did you
color.
like in the 90s when some of the I don't know if you had time. I watched the research I did for the show about watched Secret Galaxy, read the articles I listed up top, watched 40 minutes of commercials, all of the commercials, the people on the internet who have collected all of the commercials. That, by the way, to actually give the correct name, just so I give the credits, is to Rare Halloween Videos. They have a playlist of all of them. So Rare Halloween Videos is a YouTube channel that collated all of the commercials, and I did watch all of the commercials kind of front to back. And then, of course, tried some of the cereal. Only the originals, Jeff. I didn't even go outside the original too. What did you think about the 90s? It almost looked like heavy metal-ish, where it had the like grainy line style. They
Yeah, it
kinda
was
did
very
that
grainy. I didn't hate that. I think every commercial is of its time, which I think is like obviously obvious. Oh, like advertising is trying to capture the zeitgeist. Crazy. Who'd have thought? But so it definitely has that sort of grainier, more intense. That's probably the most intense those ads ever have been, right?
But
Like
even
the
then,
other
it was
ones
still
seemed a
with
lot more like children's television workshop shit. The 70s, and in the 80s, it was just more like just watching a cartoon. The
yeah,
90s, they got a little bit more intense, a little grittier. I didn't hate it.
the 80s, the thing that was most hilarious to me is when it's still 2D, but they're getting the new quote unquote, I would say, special effects. So like 3D marshmallows that can fly through the air. And they're like, whoa, the marshmallows are flying through the kitchen. Isn't this wild? And you're just like, I love it, Jeff, because it's so of its time, but it is hilarious how, it is like, ironically, the movie The Mummy with some of the CGI for like Dwayne Johnson, how dated some of that stuff gets. Or I guess
Yeah.
the Scorpion King is the dated one.
Yeah. The Scorpion King. Stupid face.
Where it looks like worse than Doom or something,
Oof.
like a video game CGI.
For all of the just shit George Lucas did to go back and redo some of his CGI and some of his puppets and stuff like that, he should do the Mummy a favor and just show up and go fix the Scorpion King's face on the Mummy too.
All right. We'll assume that both George Lucas and Jim Lee listen to this show. So again, Jim Lee, a huge fan. Jeff said all of that stuff, not me.
I mean, I do think I think it was uninspired, but I feel like that was at the behest of General Mills.
Which and like I said,
That would make sense, right? They're like, don't fuck with our brand.
Let's do this, Jeff. I've done the back catalog. Go listen to the future episode Jeff has with Olivia, where it's possible corporate sponsorships will come up. You weren't ready for that, were you, Mike Slater? You weren't ready for that. All right. So Jeff, we are close to actually my kiddos' bedtime. I'm not going to give them any chocolate cereal. I will shout this out to the Punch Out episode, Jeff. On the Punch Out episode, you mentioned you and your brother had trouble with King Hippo. I am proud to say my son figured out how to beat King Hippo this weekend. I was so proud of him. And he actually, you're saying, did Jeff have trouble with this? I'm like, yeah, figured it out. So throwback to the last episode of Nerd on Your Birthday.
A couple of things I did want to mention too, just in the last bit, within the past couple of years before Carmela Creeper, we definitely got the street artist Cause did some box art, and that was really interesting to get sort of an underground style artists to do that, not just comics, but underground. And then they actually did figures based off of these. So I think that was really interesting. And that was, I believe, this year they did that. And so now we have the Monsters Frightful Friends. That was announced this year.
Oh my
which
God.
are like their pets, which is like Igor the spider, Benny the bat, Meowberry, a ghost cat, and Scratch the snake, each of which were the companions to Chocula, Frankenberry, Booberry, and Carmela Creeper. So they're going to be, I mean, I guess out right now, you can find the marshmallows in the shapes of those pets.
I'll throw this out to you, Jeff. The box, I don't care. The boxes, even the cool ones, look like, I'm going to agree with you. I think corporate makes them very sanitized.
I think the Dave Johnson and Terry Dodson ones were good.
They're pretty good. But I'm saying it still very much looks like Frankenberry. So it's, that's the hard part. It's right, like drawing within the lines and still being creative. So hats off to that. But the Cause figure for Fruit Brute is awesome. I love this little figure. And I'm not saying little and medium, I'm saying size. I actually really that design. It actually looks really cool.
Because he looks insane.
It's awesome. And then I'll throw out too, the funny note on Fruit Brute, they actually also changed the name Fruit Brute from Fruit when it came out in the 70s to Frute when it was re-released because they couldn't argue it was close enough to fruit. Fruity Pebbles is out there. What does it tell you as a cereal when Fruity Pebbles isn't afraid of getting called
What is fruit as a part of speech? Fruit is a noun. Fruity is an adjective that does not declare that it is fruit, but that it is similar to fruit.
So interesting. So Fruit Loops is OOT, right?
Correct.
And so fruity is an adjective. And all right, that explains it. So when we're looking at all the fruit cereals, that's what we get. We get FRUTE, FROOT, or fruity.
Yeah,
Good
because they can't,
times,
because in
Jeff.
America, you can't legally say that something is fruit if it's not.
And none of those cereals should be considered fruit. Corn is not a vegetable if you've learned nothing else from this episode. Jeff, anything else to wind down on before we go off into the ether?
I mean, if you're listening to this, you have a couple more weeks to get that stock. Head on over to Target or something if you want to try these things. It is a limited time only. They last a few months. You can make it into February or March with those boxes. Give it a try if you want. Try it on ice cream. It's great. I love the Monster cereals for what they are. If I were to rank them, which I think we should do now,
Okay, let's end with ranking the monsters. So we
I would
can,
put Count Chocula up at the top. While I haven't tried it, I'm going to put Fruit Brute at number 2. I'm then going to put Blueberry and Fruity Yummy Mummy at 3 and 4, or 4 and 3. They can be flipped. I'm okay with either of that. I'm going to put Frankenberry at 5th and Carmela Creeper at 6th. Those are my standings.
I mean, Chocula is the answer. It is ridiculous they ever fought. I am going to put Frankenberry number 2. I actually did like it. It didn't taste bad and it stuck around. I've never had Fruit Brute, so all the others are kind of going off of reputation, but I'll say Fruit Brute number 3 for the appearance in Pulp Fiction, etc. I am going to do, this is tough. I'm going to put Mummy number 4. I did like that weird zeitgeist. I'm going to put Blueberry at number 5 and all walks of life. Here's the other thing, Jeff, when we talked the Jim Lee talk that kept coming up. I think it's just not that inspired of a character. They're like a ghost and Blueberry sounds like Boo. It's of the characters that
Very
seems the most thought
70s,
out.
yeah.
It's like the least thought out. It's like someone had a dad joke. And as someone who loves dad jokes, I'm still just, you can do better. And then, of course, Carmela Creeper at number 6. Feel bad for it, but that one literally, it's almost encapsulated in the cereal itself, where it's like a caramel apple DJ zombie. This is like,
It's too much.
Too much. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just too much. It's 5 hats that are being worn. And, I think it's good that they have a female character. I think that's great. You couldn't do that with Yummy Mummy. You'd
Oh,
have
good God.
really angry. I mean, that's
Jeff,
an adult film category.
you are not allowed to comment on mummies in the purview of children. You're talking about mummies' asses. You're talking about other stuff. Jeff and children's cereal mummies, keep them away from each other.
Them
I'll
away.
say.
Too dangerous, too caked up. But anyway, so that being said, this was really fun. Our next episode is weird the way we got to it, but I really am excited about it. If you want early access to this, if you're listening for free, we really appreciate that. Thank you so much. If you want early access to that, patreon.com/JeffMay. Not only do you get early access to that, plus shows like Jeff Has Cool Friends, as well as exclusive access to Fine with Kim Crawl, you can also get so much other stuff. You can produce shows like this show. You can get cards in the mail. You can do a million things. I'll even record a podcast with you. Dre, you know what that's about. That's how we started.
Yeah, that's how this started. And there's other stuff, Jeff. We need to talk about this because you will also record podcasts for people. Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong. If you head over to Hey There, Jeffro, your YouTube channel, which is Jeff May Comedy.
Yeah, the original channel. Yeah.
Your main one, which has all the podcast stuff. You and Adam Todd Brown watch Sonic X, which was sponsored, and you can do that. You can make stuff like that exist.
That was sponsored by YTP Renewed or YT Prenude. I don't know. Who also I owe an episode to, and I'm just waiting to be told what to record. So there's another thing.
Oh, that's so cool.
Ready
I'm
to
excited.
go.
So again, Jeff makes cool stuff. You can make Jeff make cool stuff. That's the thing. You're such a creative, impressive person, Jeff, that you have also given us that switch to let you do more of it, to make you watch Searching for Bobby Fischer and talk about it for over an hour. You got more, Jeff. You're not done.
I got lots of stuff, man. I do with Gamefully Unemployed. I do Tom and Jeff Watch Batman. I do a lot of stuff with Adam Todd Brown on the You Don't Even Podcasts Network. Of course, I open cards. We open cards on the @Jeff Has Cool Cards channel. Monday nights and Wednesday afternoons. Plus, I usually do mailbags on Friday. I didn't the past couple because I was either traveling or having a birthday. And also, Mint on Card is the second Friday of every month if you want to see me perform live at Blast from the Past on beautiful Magnolia in Burbank, California. I think I got everything.
That's impressive. So, of course, you can find me most places on the internet as Nerd Numbers. In a past life, Jeff, I was known for basketball stats, and I actually kind of want to get back into that this year because, as you know, I never bite off more than I can chew. But if you follow Nerd Numbers on Twitter, you'll see, or Twitter. Yeah, I'm going to say Twitter. I'm not changing the name. If you follow me over there, Blue Sky, you'll see me talking about this stuff, doing that. As Jeff mentioned, I break cards. I must Drake you at Jeff Has Cool Cards. Please like, subscribe. Let's get that channel growing because then Jeff and I can open cooler and cooler stuff. And yeah, I think that's most stuff. I'll also give a shout out. He was a producer, but Mike Slater does the theme music over there, which we absolutely love. Jeff, I think that's everything. I cannot wait for next month. We've teased it before. Go listen. I'll give you that as homework. Go listen to the Tom Ryman episode to hear what's coming up next. We'll see you next month.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Nerd. If you want to help keep the podcast growing, it's definitely worth your while to head over to patreon.com/Jeff May. Also, you'll get early access to cool stuff. Cool stuff like videos of Jeff showing off awesome collectibles and doing pack break videos. It'd be worth your while to check out Jeff May's YouTube channels. That's right, channels. For pack breaking by Jeff and myself, head over to youtube.com/JeffHasCoolCards, where Jeff breaks packs weekly, opens stuff you send him in the mail, and sometimes even gives away cool prizes. For Jeff's podcasts, head over to youtube.com/@HeyThereJeffro. That's spelled JEFFRO. And shocker, that is also his Twitter, Instagram, and any other social media accounts as well. So follow Jeff everywhere. You can find me most places on the internet as @NerdNumbers. Also, shout out to Chris Haugen for the outro theme of Pure Magic. Thanks so much, and we'll be back with another nerdy subject soon.